Morning, everyone. So I'll just give everyone a few more seconds to kind of come in, and then I'll be introducing our speakers and getting started with our wonderful conversation that we have planned for this morning. Okay, I think we should be ready to begin. So good morning, everyone, and thanks for tuning in on this slightly overcast Saturday morning. So I just want to kind of introduce why we're doing some of these programs and also, our speakers before we begin properly. So in the background, you see over here is a collaboration with another fellow illustrator, Xing Li, and for both of us, we've worked on this mural called An Unnatural History. So what it does is that, this unnatural history examines the different kind of historical narratives in a certain space, and in particular, the area around the Singapore Art Museum that we've kind of looked into, that we kind of explored across the whole expanse of this 40-meter long mural. So something that we're doing at the same time is like holding this series of 4 different sessions. So this is the third of 4 sessions, and the second for the kind of nature leg of our program. So it's my pleasure once again to welcome our 2 very esteemed speakers representing the realms of art and science. So Dr. Yong Ding Li and Robert Seow. So before we begin, I just want to tell all of you a little bit about this program, about a mural that we've created together. Okay. So as you can see, this is right outside the 8Q building along Queen Street. So if any of you are kind of looking for something to do during the start of the school holidays, or just going to looking for different places to rediscover in Singapore, you can just pop by Queen Street and examine the different scenes that we created based on this based on the vicinity of the Singapore Art Museum. So this explores the historical and natural narratives that exist in the space. And what's so unique about it is that it's a combination of the many different years of history. So dating all the way back from colonial times, before that, all the way up to modern day, where even with the Singapore Art Museum building, it's changed. It's changed its purpose so many different times. And it's also something that, we wanted to look at how nature kind of interacts with man. And what's also very unique about this is that we've always been very intrigued by this section, which, Xing Li, I thought resembled something like an aquarium. So that's how we kind of portrayed it over here. So I just want to share that if you scan the QR code or just pop by the URL over here, you're able to visit the full mural, so a digital version of the mural, and you can zoom into all the different little details. There are 168 different species of animals hidden all around the mural. And I think for the few of you who are a bit sharper-eyed, you notice a few Easter eggs that we always love to include in our work as well. And just wanted to share that on the 29th of May, we've got the final session for this series of programs, the Layers in Architectural Conservation, with Dr. 𝗘𝗫𝗛𝗡 and Xing Li. So that will kind of round off our series of programs. And just wanted to share that our mural will be up there all the way until the 6th of June. So, you've got a few more weeks to kind of check it out. And if there's anything, we're more than happy to answer some questions about the mural, about the, just anything anything that you might have noticed about the mural. Okay, so I'm going to just quickly kind of summarize what we did the last round. And so in this first series, or the first kind of the first part of the talk, what we did is we explored how both our speakers have worked together. We've explored, how they've kind of collaborated over the many, many different years. So we've also come to the conclusion that Ding Li is something of a shaman. So I think that's put very elegantly by Robert, how he's like helped us understand what's going on. So when we look at certain kind of migratory behavior, strange kind of natural phenomena that's happening, I think, what we've decided, or what we've come to the conclusion is that many of us are so distant from nature that we struggle to understand, struggle to connect, that, sometimes we need somebody from the scientific expertise to explain what's going on. And Robert helps us understand the different narratives or emotion and things that go on. So seeing it from the point of an artist. So, we've discussed the different sides, how we react very differently to what we witness, and how we also respond to it at the same time. So introducing our speakers, we've all been friends for a while now, and we've participated in so there's an event called the Parrot Count, which is a citizen science initiative where we kind of monitor different populations of parrots that are found all around Singapore. And we've also participated in the annual Singapore Bird Race, which is a very highly competitive bird watching competition. Although, at the same time, it's all about kind of celebrating the different kinds of biodiversity that we have. So our team was known as the distracted novices, and we've also been distracted by all sorts of different kinds of plants, snakes, and insects that we spotted along the way. So it's been so great knowing them and hearing from them and learning from them. So it's wonderful to be able to have the chance to share the insights with all of you. So once again, we're going to keep this session quite conversational. So Ding Li has shared that, if you've got questions, just kind of ask it at any point in time, and I'll be monitoring the question and answer section. So if it's relevant, I'll just kind of jump in and ask that. And also, we want to think of this as something that's really a huge conversation rather than just us kind of speaking on screen and all of you listening. So starting us off today would be Robert. So I'll give him a bit of time to introduce himself, and after that kind of share some of the different projects that he's been working on. Robert, would you like to take over now?
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us on a Saturday morning. Thank you, Sam, and for organizing this, and thank you, Darel, for putting me and Ding Li and you together for this conversation about conservation. Okay, so Darel, can you just help me bring up your mural again?
Okay.
So that we can take a look at it.
Give me one moment.
Yeah, I'd like to share screen, I think.
Yeah.
So the reason why I wanted to look at the mural again is that and also we kind of label this talk as art and science, but actually when I was thinking about it, actually art and science are the total opposites of approaching nature. That's what I think, because as we know, science is a very objective and a very kind of critical and focused, obsessed on one thing, and you become specialist in a single area of study, and you can't really have a broad overview. Whereas art is, I would say, it's about aesthetic and it's about emotions, and I think we are the only species that cares if something is beautiful, and we'll save it for the sake, or we'll consider something because of its beauty. I think this is what I suppose. Whereas I think, Ding Li, do you agree that art and science, and the reason why I asked Ding Li this is because Ding Li also is a very much of an artist himself. He will share later. He draws, and this is not because he's forced to, because he simply enjoys it. He's been drawing and about his kind of birds and nature all his life that I knew him since he was 15. But similarly also, his very artistic side of his career and his very kind of the main career now seems to be very separate. It kinds of he draws and he works for Migratory Birds, but these two kind of really don't present itself together most of the time. Can you give a comment about that, Ding Li, before we carry on the talk today?
I agree with you that art and science are different ways to approach the world. And as a part-time art practitioner who does it for fun, and a full-time science practitioner who does it for a living, I often see the juxtaposition in the way we try to understand the natural world. And of course, I will keep referring to the natural world because today in our talk we're going to focus more on ecology and environment. So I think science has a particular way of trying to dissect and understand the natural world. It tends to be a bit more objective. It tends to be colder. It's more grounded on facts and numbers and ideas and concepts and things like that. I just wanted to share an experience that as a journal as an editor of a scientific journal, I remember once we had a discussion with my colleague whereby we were discussing whether a paper that we were reviewing should be substantially edited, because there were a lot of terms that that carries emotional meaning, like wonderful, beautiful, these kind of things. Yeah. So reflecting on that particular experience, I think, Robert, you've got a really good point that science tends to downplay the emotions in the way we approach the natural world. Yeah.
Actually, we have a question by Chai Hong Lin. Do you want to answer that, what about the works of Leonardo Da Vinci, who is very much an artist and a scientist?
I think it depends on what Da Vinci is working on. He's worked on so many different things, right? I mean, he's got a lot of architectural and engineering drawings, which are obviously done in a very accurate way. And of course, we can also look at these images and, you know, see it from the artistic point of view as well, to have certain emotions triggered. So there's this interesting blend and juxtaposition of both scientific and artistic ideals and ideas in Da Vinci's work. Yeah, I haven't thought a lot about his work, you know, but thanks for raising that point.
Yeah, actually, I haven't thought a lot about his work, because I'm more kind of focused on kind of natural aspects, and I would say the natural history part of science. So I don't know how to comment. I really don't know how to comment about the works of Leonardo da Vinci, but I think he is a very rare individual that can kind of combine the two sensibilities together, and you know, I don't think that's I think that's kind of very rare and unique and interesting to see. Hold on,
but I think we should come back to this question towards the later part of our presentation, because after that we'll have gone through all the science things and all the art things, and we are probably better equipped by that time to look at these questions again. Yeah.
And it's a perfect kind of a juncture to talk about it also, right? Because we shared how, Ding Li, how you are both a scientist and an artist, you know, kind of combining both sides. And I think that's something quite unique about our conversation today. That it's not very often that we get to witness an artist and scientist in deep conversation, not kind of just presenting both distinct sides, but also talking about how they overlap and how they link to each other. So, you know, once again, with this round session, comparing, maybe looking a little bit at how we see art and science through different lenses, and how, you know, even if we kind of go back to the early days, right? So natural history illustrations, it's this convergence point where you wanted to record nature, but at the same time, it comes up with its own very kind of a unique aesthetic, kind of unique set of, you know, terms where our beautiful and wonderful really come back into play, and how maybe we can find out today about how art and science can offer different perspectives on each other, and how it adds to this full conversation. So maybe as we look at it after hearing from both our speakers, we're going to be more, like what Ding Li shared, more equipped to answer the question and discuss it as well. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing now and pass it on to Robert.
No, actually you ended it a bit too fast.
Oh, okay.
But never mind, I'll start with mine.
Okay, so Robert's going to bring us on into a visual odyssey of his works.
No, not yet. But anyway, I just want to add on that I think also Leonardo da Vinci was operated at a different time where we are at today. I think what I want to say is that for artists working with nature, or scientists working with nature, the very first scientists to kind of describe nature, they were called naturalists. And then the word scientist came about. When you were a naturalist, things were a bit more fluid, because you could afford to describe nature in a very aesthetic and beautiful way. And that's after a while, when things got a bit more specialized in science, it was actually, like how Ding Li said, it was actually frowned upon to be emotional. But right now, I think what me as an artist is interested in is to kind of bring back the emotional dimension of things which science describe. Why? Because I think the wholeness and the distance that we attribute to looking at animals, right, doesn't help us to necessarily connect or kind of look at them in a way that I think is meaningful or inspirational. So, but that's just me, okay? Because a lot of science and a lot of things that we look, it can be quite cold at times. Okay, so I'm going to go on. So the slide you're looking at now is on the right, it's from Google Maps. On the right is North Korea. On the left is China, Dandong. And then in the middle, you can roughly see where I have a star, this Venice Jianguo Hotel Dandong. Actually, on this island, there's also a Malayan. Actually, there's a few Malayans on the China side of this Dandong, because I think this is a fairly new city that's being developed, and a lot of their condominium projects are kind of use Singapore as a gold standard. So you'll find 2 or 3 Malayans kind of in this part of China. It's quite interesting. So I think just before COVID, happened, me and Ding Li were invited to go to this island. It's called Moon Island, the island between North Korea on the right and China on the left. And on this island, on the part near the star, there's actually a contemporary art museum that was opened by an artist. And I was introduced to him to kind of, and he wanted me to do a project at Tantong. And the typical way that I do project is first I'll call Ding Li and say, hey, I've been invited to do a project at Tantong. What do you think? And then so Ding Li immediately, oh, Tantong, I know Tantong. So let's zoom out and look at Tantong in a big perspective. So you can see the very green area on the right is North Korea, and on the left is China, and the Dandong area is there. And then if you can look down towards the bottom, you can see Yalu River kind of flowing in between North Korea and China. And then where the river meets the sea, that's our area of interest that Ding Li says is a kind of very important migratory bird site. Sanctuary. So Ding Li, would you like to talk more about Dandong?
So Tantong is a pretty interesting site that I've read a lot about, but haven't really got a chance to visit. So I'm not sure how many people on this call are ornithologists, but in East Asia, Tantong is one of the most important areas for migratory birds in the region, if not the world. There's two of the more well-known species of migratory bird. They're very rare in Singapore, but they're quite common in Malaysia, Australia, elsewhere. And they converge in Dandong in huge numbers. I think some of my colleagues who live in Dandong, they've done these counts and they found that at the peak migration period, more than 100,000 of each of these species will pass by this area on their way to Siberia north. So when Robert called me one day and say, tell me whatever you know about Dandong, I was like, oh, of course I know something about Dandong. This is the place that, it appears in the migratory bird research literature a lot. A lot of my colleagues have done studies there. And we are also trying our best to, as conservationists, in my day job as a conservationist, I'm also trying to work with people to protect these areas, for its biodiversity. So it was a very opportune moment, I must say, when Robert brought up the topic of Tantong. Yeah.
Okay, and then so I accepted the invitation that I will go to pursue a project on the condition that my fellow conservation ecologist friend can travel with me as an extra set of eyes, and so he agreed. So I think he agreed because he himself was very interested in nature, and so we were invited. So both of us went there. And before we went there, this was a bit of research. So this is from Australia BirdLife magazine in 2018. So what happened one year was that, so there's it's quite recent, there's a very dramatic story about the birds kind of converging there, and their numbers are increasing. We speculate that it may be because other sites in South Korea, is it?
South Korea, yeah, South Korea.
So they used to have a few sites around the area that they would stop. But because of development and building of new harbors, all these wetlands are cleared. So all these birds, their numbers are not going down. They are kind of maintaining, but they flock to Dandong because Dandong's wetland area is still not being developed. And so all of them would just go there. And it's kind of near North Korea. So nobody really knows what's happening on the North Korea side, right?
We know a little bit more. I got some colleagues working on the North Korean coastline now. Yeah.
And from what we can see, there's a huge number amassing at Dandong. So in 2018, there were so many that the ornithologists realized that there won't be enough shellfish for the birds. So they are basically at the mud flats looking at all these little clams, like little miniatures lala.
Yeah. The other thing, Robert, is that I remember that year there was a very cold spell in northern China. So the amount of clams on the mud flats were quite low because many of them were killed off by the sudden cold weather. So basically you've got a situation whereby there's a lot of birds gathering there, but suddenly the food drops quite significantly. Yeah.
And then so urgent call for assistance for the birds was made, and then they raised money, bought 114 tons of clams from the local fishermen, and then this is the ship you see in the picture, and they were all dumped on the mud flats during high tide. So when it's low tide, all of the birds came and they ate it up quite fast, right?
Yeah, that's right. I remember that. Yeah.
So I went with this kind of background. So I was hoping to see if there will be any new developments 2 years, I think 2019, 2020,
2019, right? 2019.
2019,
Yeah.
and then so we went. And then when we were there, we actually what was not planned was that the museum director actually was a close friend with Mr. Bai, who is pictured on the left here with
Yeah.
the telescope. So Mr. Bai has been looking at the Yellow River estuary for a decade, almost a decade or more.
Yeah, we actually the funny part is that I know of Mr. Bai, but I've never met him before. And you suddenly say you want to go to Dandong. So when we arrived in Dandong, we asked our host, whether if the host by any chance know anyone who is doing bird research in Dandong. I think that was what happened, right? And then he suddenly said that, oh, I know this guy. And then I looked at him and I said, oh, I know that guy as well. So it's a funny serendipitous connection of people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it turned out when the museum director was developing the island, he had a lot of space on the island, and the island itself is actually very bizarre because it is made from he reclaimed the island between the North Korea and China border, so he kind of built the island out from all the construction debris that was happening around China in that time, so it was all dumped there, and the island was formed. So then he built kind of housing projects here and there. And during that time, very early on, about 10 years ago, Mr. Bai was interested in saving animals that were injured in Dandong. And he needed an animal sanctuary. So the museum director at that time said, okay, I'll give you a space on this island for you to rehabilitate and save these animals. So that's how Mr. Bai and our museum director got to know each other. And of course, Mr. Bai would have brought our director to Birdwatch when he was helping him out. So they go back quite a long way. And so it was really because of this prior friendship that they had that Mr. Bai agreed to join us for the bird counting trips during the very short time that we were there.
It was ad hoc.
Yeah, it was very, very ad hoc. So I'm just going to show you under the conditions that we watch the birds. So I think this was built. I'm not sure why it was built, but you can see just now that there was a lot of people. I think Ding Li has also told me he has probably never seen anyone, so many people bird watching before. I think there must have been at least 500 to 600 people watching birds that day.
More than
that. Yeah. I think it would be, because there was almost 20 to 30 buses, and they were just coming.
Was it a normal day also, or like even it was a special kind of thing?
No, it was the season. It was the season. It was the season, and as you can see, the landscape is very surreal. It's just a mud flat, and then suddenly, the birds will just come, and they will start flying. And the reason, and so everyone's just crowded along this barge. And me and Ting Li were there also.
Yeah, we were.
And we were just kind of looking, and there were many photographers there as well. And when we were doing all this, Mr. Bai actually was with his telescope, as he is for the last decade. And he was actually, and then, me and Ting Li were talking to him, and then we realized he actually is not listening to us because he was just looking at his telescope, and he was
very intense. I think he was
and he just nodded and shook his head, and then I realized that he was actually counting the birds, and it took extreme concentration to be counting birds under this kind of situation. And then he did it for a while, a long time, and then now you can roughly hear the situation of the hundreds of people behind me as the birds come in and all the cameras were going off. And then I realized what Mr. Bai was doing is he was actually counting birds. He was counting the number of birds that he saw that day. And after about 30 minutes, he told me 54,231. I was like, wow. Yeah, and then he was like, okay, come, let's go. We need to go to another spot to make my numbers work. So he has a system that he counts, and he counts it every year. And so we know roughly the number of birds that are coming. So So he's been charting it for quite some time.
More than 10 years, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, more than 10 years. So he's like, and he told me like it's a pity that nobody was counting birds before him, because then we will never know the amount of
The change, right?
the
over
change that
time.
we have. Because, and he said like he felt like he started, it was just a shame nobody counted before him. And we know for sure that the counting is not accurate, of course, but because he's the only one doing it and he's been doing it the same way for a decade, so there is a certain sense to the numbers.
So certain kind of consistency in that sense
Yes.
that we can follow a trend.
Because
Correct.
with a particular approach, right? A very standardized way of doing things. Yeah.
Yeah. So you see, then it's a version of the truth, right? Just like art. And so when I was there, right, I was very aware that actually a lot of photographers were photographing this scene, and I think the director was there also. So I was thinking, oh, actually, how can I make a work out of this spectacle?
What kind of ideas you can explore?
Yeah, what am I going to do? Because there's so many, there's already so many images taken of this phenomenon. How can I kind of make this, make people kind of think about this again? So when he just blurted out 54,231, I actually had the idea of what I wanted to do. So when we were looking at the birds, people were saying that, oh, they see things like a number or a word, because they are so fluid, you can see whatever you want. So my main objective became to try to photograph the birds in a straight line. And also it became, because the museum is quite big, so I thought maybe what I need to do is to make every bird kind of visible again. So this is a very large image, which I took. And then after that,
was it? What's the size of this image again?
it's about 6.5 by 2 meters.
Okay.
So, and then what I did was, after that, so this is a wide shot that I had. And then when you blow it up, you can't really see the birds because they're so small. So what I did was, after that, I kind of replaced each and every single bird inside to make them visible again, just so that it will go along with Mr. Bai's observation of each and every single bird that he saw. So basically, it was quite a very simple and straightforward approach to the project of these migratory birds. And I felt it was also very important to see the people who are always crowded there to look and count the birds every day with Mr. Bai. So actually, a lot of people didn't know what was they were looking at. And Mr. Bai was very patient, and he explained, oh, these are birds that probably flew non-stop from Australia and they're on their way to Siberia. That's why they look so thin, and then they will fatten up. And then he can also recognize the birds that are off flying to Siberia because they are a bit fatter. They are ready to go. So actually most people are there because they are domestic tourists, and the tour guides saw Mr. Bai's tweet on Twitter that this is something that you can see in Dandong. A lot of them arrive there and look at this because this in itself is not very common in China too, right?
It's mostly in the northeastern coastal areas of China. There's quite a few spots, but this is one of the finest in the country.
Yeah, and so I felt the human scale to this phenomenon is quite important when I was making the photographs. Okay, so we did this project, and then I went there 3 times to photograph everything and then to deliver the exhibition. And then after that, we came back. Another curator saw the exhibition and then invited, and then gave me we have a question regarding this. Darel, can you see it?
Yeah. Okay. So the question is, do the birds only fly past the area from Australia to Siberia, or vice versa too?
I think they go both ways.
So will these birds actually stop by Singapore also, or no?
The short answer is no.
Okay.
Yeah, the short answer is no. Maybe some does. We will never know the full story because we are not able to track the movement of every single individual. Yeah.
But these are great knots and curlews. Great knots, is it?
There are great knots. An endangered kind of bird called a great knot, and then there's another one with a really long bill. I think you remember the far eastern curlew.
Yeah, the far eastern curlew.
That is another endangered species that goes to Australia, and there's another one with a bill that's upturned. The bill goes downwards up. That is called the 𝗦𝗣𝗘𝗥𝗦𝗡. That goes to Australia and New Zealand.
And the birds, right? None of these come to Singapore, or sometimes we have them.
The species is also found in Singapore, but I cannot say for sure whether if the species that those individuals that show up on our shores are from these flocks. I think most of these would move to to northern Australia based on the data that we have from satellite tracking.
And Ding Li, so someone wants to know also which part of the year do the birds normally migrate?
Birds usually migrate. So you see, the life history of a migratory bird is that they spend 2 to 3 months in the breeding grounds in northern Asia. So I'll give you the example of the great knot, which is probably in this picture. The great knot is a kind of bird that lives on coastal muddy areas in our part of the world. It breeds in Siberia and Russia, all right? And when it arrives in Russia, usually it does so around middle to late May, and they would pair up and have chicks, and then they will leave Russia around July, August. So they actually spend 2, 3 months only in Russia, and then they make their journeys down south to New Zealand and Australia again. And they do this year after year, up, down, and each time they make one journey down, it's about 10,000 kilometers. Tantong, in particular, is key, a major, I call it a major petrol kiosk. Petrol kiosk is a major refueling station for a lot of these birds. So huge numbers of them gather here to feed on the mud. The mud is very rich in worms. I don't know if anyone here on this presentation has actually gone into the mud of these coastal swamps, but if you dig your hand into the mud and pull it out, one lump of mud like that, right? It's very rich in worms. With people have tried to measure it, how many worms are there in 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter of mud? There are tens of thousands of worms, and that's what the birds are after. The great knots like to eat clams that you can see on the coast if you are there up close. They are little white clams, yeah. So that's the story of migratory birds in the nutshell. I can go on for hours on this stuff, yeah, but I better pass it back to Robert.
Just to give you a sense of what's happening, we're actually there for almost 6 hours, and the flight is not non-stop. This doesn't happen continuously for 6 hours. The truth of the situation is that most of the time we are looking at nothing, because the birds fly only. Okay, what's happening is they will land near the line of the tide, right?
Yeah.
And every time the tide moves in, so the best time to go is when it's a kind of low tide. And the tide is just coming in, and so what's happening here is they will land at the part where the water meets the shore. So every few minutes or every 15-20 minutes, when the tide moves in a bit, they'll all fly up to move to the new line that is being formed.
You know why, Robert?
Why? Please say.
We see as the tide rise, the water is going higher and higher up their legs. Right? So it's like if I'm wearing pants, right? If my underwear starts to get wet from the water, of course I will adjust my position. I'm using that as a really bad analogy, really. But I mean, the birds like to have a certain amount of their legs underwater, but not too much. So they keep moving and adjusting and adjusting and adjusting. Yeah, until it becomes very high, they'll just move somewhere else to rest.
Yes, correct. And then what's happening is they are forced to move nearer and nearer towards the people, and they are actually very uncomfortable with that because they are quite squeamish, right?
Yeah, they are quite scared of people. I mean, animals have evolved to be scared of people for obvious reasons.
Yeah, so actually, so that's the truth of the situation, that when you're there, they are kind of being forced to come nearer and nearer to the crowd, and then eventually, actually, when it gets too near the crowd, they all just fly off to another part of the coast where there's no people. That was the situation that when we were there. Okay, so a few months later, a curator saw the show, and then he wanted me to visit Guangzhou in China. And so I kind of did some preliminary research, and Guangzhou is a kind of very urban and developed, I would say, area in China. The Pearl River Delta, that is one of the most built up area in the world.
Yeah, it's I think the combined population of Pearl River Delta is about close to 100 million. And
so the museum is in Sunder in Guangzhou, and we did as much. So we do so our initial research or idea that I proposed before going was that I will look at sites that were built in the 80s or 90s, and then they have been closed down and not been developed and left to nature. And we kind of observe how nature is taking back the area. And I know for sure in developed cities like this, there will always be areas that are left to waste unintentionally. And but all this was just because these are things that I did before in Singapore or elsewhere, and then I thought I could propose the same thing. But when we were there with Ding Li, right? The moment we landed at the airport, and then when we went to the museum for I think 2 hours, what was shocking was that we didn't even see a single bird in the whole city. And then we realized, oh no, this is not going to work. Even the places that nature has supposedly claimed back would be kind of devoid of any kind of life for me to kind of look at the way nature and
Yeah, I think Robert, after being exposed to Tantong, the Yalu Delta estuary, we were quite surprised, you know, at how stark Chunde was. There was so little nature in the city, and I think Robert was a bit nervous about whether if we could find the right places to do some work in.
okay,
Right?
so
Was it? Yeah, I think that
yeah,
was
yeah,
our
yeah.
experience.
I think it was quite kanchong. And then the museum, so the deserted areas that were occupied, nature has taken back, was kind of far from the museum, and the museum staff was saying that it will be quite difficult for them to do follow-up work when I'm away. So they have to kind of follow up the work for me. And then they did tell us early in the meeting that there's this space in Guangzhou that is owned by a construction company. The owner has decided to not harvest the bamboo plantation that he was using to build scaffolding. So it's a booming business because it's in construction, and every construction needs scaffolding. So
Yep.
so he grew his own bamboo, harvest them, and make them into scaffold. But he has stopped doing it for quite some time. Maybe I think it's 2002, 2003. So it's been very long. And then he said, and we were told that he has a heronry there, right? Is that what you call it, a heronry?
Yeah, it's like a colony of nesting herons. Actually, this is not Guangzhou. I think this is at Sunder. Is it still? I think it's in Sunder, right? Was it?
Sunder is in Guangzhou, I think.
No, it's in Foshan.
Foshan, okay.
Yeah, Foshan.
So, and actually, me and Ding Li were both not very interested because I think there's heronry in Singapore too, right?
Yeah, in fact, I think when we went to Foshan, we were asking ourselves what are the interesting things that we can get out of this city. You know, I mean, it's not a city that many people visit. I think for most ordinary people, Foshan's claim to fame is martial art. So
And also the dim sum in Guangzhou.
yeah. So we were wondering if there's any nature that we can explore in the city where we can.
That is on the same surprising level as what we would expect of Dandong. You know, there's something that's purely kind of spectacle that's only happening in Foshan, and and also because herons and egrets are not very exciting species, right? You see, we are kind of very
we are becoming a bit judgmental. I mean, these birds are quite common. They're quite common birds, and when people see animals too often, they start to lose attention. You know, they don't pay as much attention as they could to birds that are relatively easy to see. So when we went to Foshan, we were like, oh, okay, herons, we have that also in Singapore. So what interesting narratives can we glean out of the herons? I think these are some of the challenges that we face here.
We actually swept we actually pushed their suggestions out very early on. I think even in the email they were trying to tell us to look at this, but we're like, no. But then when we were there, we realized that there's really any kind of there's really zero kind of any biodiversity within the city area. And then we kind of like, okay, then maybe let's visit this bamboo plantation.
Yeah, visit the guy who was recommended to us.
Okay, so I'm just going to place this house, right, that we're looking at, this house that we're looking at used to be a tea house that he used to entertain his guests in. So basically, me and Ding Li left 30 to 40 remote cameras inside the bamboo forest because what happens is that nobody really knows, because it doesn't open up the bamboo plantation to the public.
Yeah, it's closer.
It's close, and he only when there's only like when we call on him, and then he will kind of bring us on a kind of a normal route around the way that he will walk kind of daily. So you can see that inside he built a lot of things specially meant for him himself to look at the birds. He, let me just carry on, and then so that's him, and that's a hide that he built because he's in the scaffolding business. So this is the main hide that if visitors come, they can go in and then they go up to kind of look at the whole plantation. But to go in is, he doesn't like people to go in. He doesn't like people to walk past it because he's very afraid that the birds will be disturbed.
Yeah.
And then he was very, very concerned about the welfare of the birds. and so much so that he abandoned one of the houses because the birds started to nest near it. So he's really very obsessed, and he talks about birds. Everything about him is just breathing about the egrets and the herons that are inside his
And Chinese
sanctuary.
tea.
And and he has Chinese tea. So we kind of immediately, I think when you meet people that are so obsessed with nature, for me and Ding Li, we kind of really, you can you hit it off really well. And then we say, we're going to put cameras here. Then say, okay, we're going to look at your birds. Okay. And then it was something I felt. They asked him, has there been any scientific surveys done here? I say no. Although some scientists will drop by to do some bird watching, but that's about it. And so I say, let's see what you have in your forest. So it's basically the main idea was to let the birds speak for themselves, and then you kind of so the cameras are still there. So I visited there 3 or 4 times. We placed the cameras, and then for every month, the museum staff will go do the maintenance of the cameras, send me a hard disk, and then I will edit the videos in time for the exhibition. So this was really in January 2020, before the outbreak happened.
Wait, this picture was pre-Christmas, I think, of 2019.
2019, this was on the recce trip.
Yeah, I think it was on the 21st of December 2019.
And yeah, so the whole work is a video installation of about 365 days of just what the birds. You can see basically you can see the birds growing up over the period of the year, and then how they build nests again and how they caught. So it's a story of their life inside this sanctuary. Once again, they are not they are not endangered birds, not like the great knots we seen earlier. They're just these birds literally can be found in Singapore, right?
Yeah,
the same species. So the challenge was really to kind of how do you make focus on the story of them being able to survive in such a space that was set aside for them. Okay, we have some questions here.
Darel, you're saying something?
Oh, yes. Yeah, something else that you shared with all of us also is that lots of people didn't even know about, as in, even though Mr. Hsien has been there for such a long time, he actually didn't get to witness all these kind of hidden sides, because, when you go there, the squeamish, they kind of like fly off, and you actually were able to show him something very different from what he already knew about the space, right?
Yeah, I think so, because these cameras were, a lot were damaged because it was so wet and rainy, and the birds just destroyed them. I think it also because they are on a fixed point, so we can see exactly the same individuals going to their spot once a day. You start to realize that these birds have their own lives inside this sanctuary. After intensely looking at them for about a year, and that it's not just another egret, but it's this very egret that used to come here to this rock every day about 2 p.m.
Personalities.
You start to see the individual personalities emerge from these birds in this space, and then you kind of like really get a sense of the what each and every bird is doing around the different areas in this bamboo forest.
So it's much like kind of looking at individuals again, right? In your previous project, from looking at the whole masses, now we are kind of being able to look and zoom into specific individuals. Yeah, actually, so we do have quite a few questions right now, right? So let me see. I think the technology questions are really interesting. So maybe we can do that after Robert finishes his presentation. So we can kind of group them together. And so maybe we can answer the ones about how long does it take to harvest the bamboo there as well? So maybe, in the state that it currently is, right? Is it something that, has been actively built up over many, many years, or how would that work?
So I don't really know, because as you can see, the bamboo has been just growing wild. And he does need to maintain the site. He needs to drain the water and kind of make sure the water flows. So he actually, what is nice about this man, Mr. Hsien, is that for every businesses, what we want is for it to grow, right? We must grow. When we buy stocks, our stocks must grow. When you invest, right, it's investing in growth. Nobody wants a company that is stable, right? Our economy, our economy cannot maintain, right? It is like, but what Mr. Hsien does is, there's an idea that I have enough. I do not need more. What I have now is good for tomorrow and good for the day after. And then what he does is he sustains his business at that level, and he spends more to upkeep the forest for the birds. So actually he only harvests, there's a whole parts of the plantation he doesn't harvest anymore. And there's some parts that is mainly, and there's just a small part of it to harvest for his business. And how long it does, I think the bamboo grows, I think about every season. I think it's about just a year.
Bamboo grows very fast.
Yeah, it grows very, very fast.
Yeah.
From as for what I can see for the cameras, it is really quite fast. The landscape changes almost each season. So once it's gone, but it will climb out very fast. But the part where he left for the birds is kind of stabilizing because they are kind of mature bamboo. And they just kind of, the landscape is the same. But those that are being cut off, they regenerate quite fast. And I think
know how long it takes for the birds to actually kind of move into the space when he left it. Was it something that just kind of happened quite quickly, or was it?
No, the birds came in first, and then one day he realized when the birds were there, he decided to stop harvesting the bamboo because he felt like, oh my God, I think they need this space more than I do. And so there's this, which is just bizarre, even in the whole the whole area, and you can see that the whole area, right, is being developed for high-rise condominiums. You can see it coming around the background. And he doesn't own the land. He rents it from the local village council. So his rental, right, is very precarious. When we were there, he was saying that they have not renewed his
lease.
His lease.
Yeah.
He's very worried, and that he's worried that if he doesn't get to rent it anymore, they will develop it into the condominium, because this is quite a very expensive piece of land. It's very near the city, the central. So it is with this kind of background that you come to appreciate the idea of these birds, and the idea that someone is actually trying to save it. So it's really, there's nothing, I would say, ecologically and scientifically, there's nothing shocking or new. It's really the emotional dimension of this story that I think that me and Ding Li were really very impressed with. Okay, so we...
Yeah, I think just a bit of ecological things about this image. I find this image by Robert particularly stuck, because this is what the Pearl River Delta was before they built all these huge infrastructure and all the concrete everywhere. Where we were, this whole bamboo plantation is on a very waterlogged area of swamp. And such a swamp would be more widespread, 30, 40 years ago, when the entire Pearl River Delta was less developed. So where you have currently Guangzhou, Foshan, Hong Kong, much of that area was swampy. So I was quite struck by the fact that you've got this little green oasis surrounded by concrete all over the place. It was
the view from this height, actually.
Yeah.
Another question also is that so we've spoken a lot about birds in particular, right? So whenever there are all these kind of efforts taken to preserve birds, do other animals also how are they impacted, and are they also kind of do they benefit from the situation? And let's say when recording the herons, right, do you witness other animals in the background as well?
Actually, birds are the most, because this is a waterlogged area, right? And it's kind of barricaded with fence because he doesn't want people getting in. So I think in that sense, right, only birds can come in and out. Mammals, except rats and mice, do not appear in this landscape at all because of the way that he's barricaded it. Yeah, so we only observe birds, no reptiles.
Yeah, but I think broadly when nature is preserved for birds, usually it's also able to benefit other species. I mean, this is one interesting example for us, but generally birds share their environment with a lot of other wildlife. So when we try to protect birds, we are protecting other things as well. Yeah, whether you talk about here in Singapore or in China or elsewhere in Europe, for example.
It's really a reminder of the interconnectedness of all these ecosystems, and especially, I guess, how the ecosystems have changed a little bit, like in this picture, right? We're witnessing no longer is just all greenery, all kind of an urban space, but it's a combination of both, and how we kind of navigate this situation now.
Yeah, there's quite a few parallels that we can take from our visit to Singapore. You know, it's this very stark juxtaposition of urban versus nature, which I guess Robert explored quite deeply with his works. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, so we there's some more questions. Actually, someone dismissed a question about how was the dim sum. But actually, I would say, because eating with Mr. Xian, right, is a very, I think for me and Ding Li, it was a very strange experience because he's so connected to the land. His food, right, is very, very different from what we usually had.
Would you use organic?
It was very, I wouldn't even say it's organic. It's really kind of ancient. The chicken,
basic.
It's very basic. So it's all braised with hot water. So we had chicken that was very, very tough. So you think our kampong free range chicken is very organic, right? The chickens that we were there, right, were so tough that I didn't even know what I was eating. But it was supposedly a very natural kind of chicken that has no fats, and it was just kind of free running, and it was a kind of like a very big deal to be eating that chicken. And then the vegetables were so crunchy and bitter, but they said that this is the best vegetables that they offer to guests. So that was when me and Ding Li realized that we are so disconnected with the food that we eat that we don't even know originally what do vegetables and chickens in the wild taste like. So this is something I think in response to your dim sum question, is that we are kind of like a very I would say very profound experience eating the food that was offered to us each time we went there, because we are just so not used to eating such natural food that has not been very modified. So these were vegetables and chicken from a different stock that has been there in Foshan for a long time, and they have not been factory farm or factory they have not been factory farm at all. So it was like really wild. It was very bitter. It was not grown to be sweet. It was grown to be what it was. So that's that. And in huge flocks, they are always on the move. How do birds decide who to follow, when and where to fly? I think this is a Ding Li question.
In many bird flocks, usually birds follow particular leaders. I don't know about these kinds of flocks because there's an entire science out there that studies flocking behavior. And I don't claim to be an expert of flocking behavior, but in the smaller kinds of flocks that scientists have studied, usually among things like storks, cranes, there's always a leader in a flock, and the leader would obviously influence the way the whole flock behaves as it moves around. But these kind of more complex flocks, I think things are simply not as simple as what we can see for other smaller flocks. Yeah, so I can't go into the depth of that question, but I can offer some very general ideas here. But that's where we are, for these huge flocks. Yeah.
Okay, so as we're coming to 12 o'clock right now, I just want to let everyone know that we'll be hanging around for a few more minutes. So I understand that there are quite a few questions, and we love to kind of go through some of them as well. So we're here to we're here. But if we understand if anyone needs to kind of leave right now, just wanted to thank you all for joining in this session. But so in the meantime, I'll just be kind of continuing answering some of them. And I wanted to kind of go back to the idea of technology in particular. So, if we're talking about, because we're witnessing kind of artworks right now, and how can technology, so even when talking about your different cameras, right, it's something that wouldn't be able to, you couldn't do that many years ago. And also, so someone was asking, can technology help to count the birds? Does that aid what Mr. Bai is doing right now? And would that objectivity that actually change the situation, maybe from the point of view of conservation, or maybe even trying to just better understanding the total population numbers? And if I can combine it with the other question as well, is that so we're talking about art and science at the same time, right? So does it kind of which one do you think inspires the other? So technology maybe being able to contribute to art and science itself in terms of information that we know. And do you think, they inspire one or the other, or is it kind of both ways as well?
I think it happens both ways, I think I give you the example of Robert using all these different technologies to basically probe into nature, right? I mean, in the case of the work that he's done in southern China, there's a lot of use of um, camera traps. Camera traps is a particular kind of technology that we nowadays use to study animals in a remote fashion. So we put camera traps in. People are putting camera traps all over the place to study animals and understand species that are there if you cannot physically see them there. We know that many animals are quite shy, so if you're physically there, they won't show up. But if you put a camera there that gets triggered off by the movement of the animal and then you go away, you are likely to see the animal eventually. So I think uh, what Robert has really done, right, is showing us that we can constantly tap onto new wildlife technologies to explore ways of representing nature and ideas and subjects from the natural world. I mean, not just camera traps, there are many other tools that scientists use to understand nature. For example, when we study bats, I don't know how many people here are bat biologists, but people who study bats, they use certain devices to identify bats based on the frequencies of these very high pitched sounds that they produce. So that could be another way, of how we represent and dig deeper into the realms of nature. So definitely, I think we have to admit, and I suspect Robert will agree with me that we can constantly harness technology from I mean, in our examples, we tend to be very focused on the natural sciences, right? In the study of ecology, in the study of biodiversity, how these technologies can offer us different ways of looking at nature, how these technology offer different lenses, so to speak, to look at nature. So that's one thing for sure. But at the same time, we also acknowledge, and again, I think Darel and Robert will agree with me that 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 it works not just in one way, it also goes the other way. That when we look at things from an artistic point of view, we can draw inspiration to do certain science research and vice versa. Yeah. Although I think maybe because of the way we think about science, there's a more idea flow from science to art, but I'm sure there are examples going the other way around. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of artwork these days that draws inspiration from nature or certain concepts in ecology, which Robert has obviously explored quite extensively in his works. I actually wanted to talk a little bit about his work in Christmas Island because I thought that was a very impactful piece of work for me. There's two pieces of work that I worked with him on that was quite wholesome for me in terms of my personal experience, as well as comprehensive in the way we explore ideas in ecology. So Christmas Island was one. I think Robert can probably say a few more words about Christmas Island, but
Would you like to share your images for that?
I want to share. Well, it's not really my image; it's Robert's image. So I will.
Oh, your prepared images.
Yeah, so I'll just go quickly to Christmas Island. I'll do a quick share screen for those who are still here and want to see Robert's work on the Christmas Island natural history. Is it visible on your screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think, well, this was done more than 7 years ago when I was in Australia and I linked up with Robert and we discussed, different ideas of how to create art out of what subjects and ideas we can get out of Christmas Island's ecosystems. And island ecosystems generally are quite interesting. They are compact, they are small, they are vulnerable, and then a lot of island ecosystems also are home to unusual species. So island ecosystems provide you with ideas and subjects for you to dig deeper in the art that you do. And I think Robert has done it quite excellently with his series. This is just one of the images. I mean, this image was quite striking for me because it's a very stark juxtaposition of the famous Christmas Island land crab against its a drab shoreline. But I think for those of you who are interested and go into Robert's albums from Christmas Island, he looks at quite a number of different species and the things that the species are doing, and explore themes of uniqueness, vulnerability, invasive species. I think he's talked a lot about invasive species in his artworks. You know, how cats, for example, cats are extremely destructive to island ecosystems because they prey on a lot of these smaller and more vulnerable species. And I think there are cases in history whereby one cat has caused the extinction of a species of wildlife, you know. There's one famous example from New Zealand where one cat that was owned by a lighthouse keeper killed every individual of one species of bird on the island. And at that point of time, the bird was even unknown to science. So the lighthouse keeper picked up this dead bird, which the cat brought in, and sent it to ornithologists to study, and realized that, oh, this is actually a new species of birds. But by then he couldn't find any more living individual because his cat has killed everything in that whole island. So I think this was another theme that Robert explored in his work for Christmas Island. I don't want to go into all the nitty-gritties of Christmas Island, that particular set of works. So I think those of you who are interested, you can probably probe Robert's website. And then
the website is Critical Zoologists, manyzoologists.org.
You want to type it out in the, you can type it on the answer.
Yeah, Robert put it on the chat. I think people will
Okay.
be interested to look at your Christmas Island work. Yeah. And then while Robert is typing, I just want to also talk a little bit about the work that he did with me about birds in Singapore. Some of you here are probably bird watchers or are aware of birds in Singapore, but this was something that we did more than 8 years ago, whereby people in Singapore were becoming more aware of what these things, what we call, you know, window collisions. Every image of every bird that you see on this image that Robert composed is a bird that has killed itself when it collided onto the window, you know. And you can see on this collage that there are many different species of birds involved. Many of these species that you are seeing in this image are migratory birds, a topic that is very close to my heart. So when we came together to think about bird collision, we also had to explore more deeply into, you know, the ecology of migratory species, as well as how change in our urban environment is affecting biodiversity. These are two very major themes in this work which Robert tried to explore. It was also going on alongside some more scientific work that I was doing with other colleagues. We're trying to understand how Singapore's changing landscape is affecting migratory birds. And Robert shared with me this poster that we made 7 years ago, trying to get people to submit their observations of birds that have been killed by collisions with windows around Singapore. Yeah, so I think that was to me, this was a very meaningful piece of work whereby it's a bit poignant. The image itself is very telling, it's very poignant, but it's also an exploration of some deeper themes in biodiversity and ecology. So I think I better pass the floor back to Robert. I think he's got something more to say about some of the other works that he has shared. Yeah. So over to you, Robert.
You can let me share screen.
Yep.
Actually, okay, wait. There are a few questions here. Let's just clear them first.
Yeah.
The birds are fed by fishes in the swamp. Yes, actually, Mr. Xian will always introduce fresh batches of little fishes in every year, so that it will keep the stock of the fishes up, so that the birds will keep on going there. But I think only the herons and the egrets are dependent on the fishes in the stream. There's a lot of other birds there that depend on the insects that are probably living in the streams. Yeah. So there's a kind of the different birds are living on different things inside the bamboo forest.
So is he like one-man conservation group?
Yeah, he's
like from the space, from providing food, resources, and everything.
Yeah, he has to learn what the birds are eating, how the birds behave in his sanctuary. So he has a lot of knowledge that is only very specific to what's happening inside his bamboo forest. And he has 2 or 3 friends who does this kind of things in different parts of China, that they just rent land for the birds. So I think there's at least 2 other individuals that he knows of, and they discuss their problems together.
Did you know him before we went there? We didn't know him then, right?
No. I mean, we were interested, but he's already very famous on social media, on YouTube. He's called the Birdman of Sunder. So there are several. I think there are 2 other Birdmans in different parts of China, doing the same kind of thing. Okay. And we've done this. done this. Any bird nest farms in China? I'm not sure if in China, but I do know they in Indonesia there's a lot. Most parts of Indonesia I've been to suddenly have a lot of buildings.
Yeah, yeah, it's quite popular now. People
Yeah.
are investing into it. People are pumping money to, for these kind of investments to basically they rent or they construct empty houses to attract swifts because swifts
Taiwan too, yeah.
yeah, I've seen it in Cambodia also. Cambodia, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, everywhere.
Okay,
Okay.
so let's move on to the final question
with
before we
regard to
round
the
up.
dichotomy between art and science, to which side of the dichotomy do I place my work? So I'm assuming this is to me. If art, what is the emotional aesthetic you're trying to evoke? If science, what is the objective truth you're revealing or researching? So I have been so as an artist like me and Darel who works with nature, right? Our work is so much informed by science, but on that level, right, we also have to think about how the science that we are thinking about or using, how it is produced. I think we said earlier on, or maybe last week, that not science is also a perspective of the truth. It's also so different. We need to find the different ways in which this knowledge has been reached. We have to consider like invasive species is not the common word on the street is that invasive species are bad and that we must conserve native species. But there is many other perspectives out there by other different scientists that are not heard. So as an artist, what I try to do is I try to balance out this knowledge. Also, I bring it into my works so that my work is kind of has a kind of a broader scope. So I try to read as much as I can about the different perspectives of something that I'm working on with physics science. And so I'm not trying to reveal any objective truth like science. So what I try to do is I try to do what maybe science cannot do. I try to be more emotional. So really what I want is for us to kind of think about non-human species, to have more compassion, to kind of really think about their place with us as we go along our everyday. So this is really what my main idea is. And as an artist, I think me and Darel, you can see Darel's work, I would say, is kind of embedded between fiction and non-fiction. It's non-fiction because the species in which he draws are documented in Singapore, but they're just not documented in the way that he sees himself, that he portrays it. And how I would say is that a lot of how I think artists who works with nature is we are in this very strange position where we have to rely on facts at the same time. And then we also have to kind of produce a fantasy or fiction or imagination that kind of spark out what we are trying to make you see. So we are working kind of in between the objectivity of science and the emotional aesthetic, right?
Yeah.
And I think the works of Leonardo Da Vinci, right? If you kind of think about it, Leonardo Da Vinci was operating at a time where and he's a genius, I would say he's a genius who was interested in everything. He's not interested just in science, but he's interested in art, in nature, and everything. And he was very good at dissecting ideas and drawing them out. But very few of us can be so adequate at everything, Yeah, a lot of I think at least for me, I can only be good with the artistic side of things. And today, really, what is expected of the scientists is like I think he said, it's very different from when nature just started. A lot of the natural movements were started with scientists or naturalists at that time.
Natural history movements.
Yeah, natural history movement. They were naturalists. They could afford to be emotional. They paint. They write papers. But very few scientists are kind of straddling that these days. It's just because they have to be very, very specialized in what they do, and they just wouldn't have time for to be painting or writing nonfiction.
Yeah, a lot of the natural historians or the practitioners of natural history were doctors on ships, so they had nothing better to do. When no one was sick, they just sat around and collect specimens. I don't know if like the case of Charles Darwin's ship, or I don't know if some of you might even have watched this movie called Master and Commander. It's a very typical ship naturalist who goes around to collect specimens and try to interpret nature. Yeah. Darrell, I just wanted
Yes.
to uh, join some dots there.
Mhm.
When Robert was talking about his perspectives on how, as an artist, he tries to deconstruct nature or
Mhm.
imagine nature in his works,
Mhm.
where do you stand on that? I mean, did you have
Mm.
particular views in how you represent and deconstruct nature in your works?
I think for myself, it's always primarily the idea of stories. So I enjoy kind of exploring different narratives. So some of them can exist. They can exist in actuality already. There's some others that exist only in kind of people's imagination. So when we always think of, let's say, dolphins versus sharks, there's that
Mm,
that kind of a battle that every kind of kid is familiar with, like the good versus the bad. But I think something that I personally quite enjoy is a combination of all these. So it could be behaviors that I witness in nature, and then thinking about how I can add a different layer of interpretation there. So I think very much like what Robert said, it's fiction or kind of interpretation of non-fiction, and then about how kind of we as artists, as creators, we can be retelling the stories. So I think very much with the mural as well, there are many ways of understanding it, whether it's kind of nature encroaching upon the city, or nature being pushed out of the city. I think both are very valid interpretations of what we see there. And also, I like to think about how different people coming from different backgrounds will see it very differently. So, and then we might also kind of witness a child who hasn't quite formed these opinions, and how they might just observe nature in all its glory, or maybe to them nature is actually seeing animals within an urban space. So I just love hearing how I can kind of invite conversations on this point, and how different people just understand it. Because I think, like Sing we want to make it very clear that we're not making a particular definite statement, but rather that it is kind of drawing attention, kind of drawing focus onto certain points that allow people to interpret it in their own way, with their own backgrounds and their own kind of context. And that how we will come up with many, if everyone were to kind of write about it, we have like 10, 20 different or 100 different kind of interpretations. And that's what we feel is so powerful about what we want to do over here, that it's in a public space that people will just kind of read into it differently. And that's what we really enjoy.
Someone just mentioned
Yeah.
that art can inform science. His example was this landscape, this painter from 18 painting series of paintings from 1871 called Thomas Moran, who helped conserve Yellowstone National Park. Series of paintings about that. But I think that. I think this happened a lot um, in history, where artists have painted great landscapes to kind of highlight the sublime effect that it can have on people. Uh,
yeah.
but Ding Li, how often, because you are in the work of conserving migratory landscapes, right?
Mm.
But wetland migratory spots. How often do you think art can actually help you in your line of work? Because every day you are having conferences to discuss, and you're discussing with uh, governments about, Dandong is important.
We use art
Don't
in
screw it up.
we use art in very diverse ways, but I think typically we use art as a tool to communicate. We at the end of the day, as a conservationist, there is a bunch of narratives and messages that I want to convey to my audiences. Basically, to get people more aware of nature, in whichever way those guys want to interpret nature, and to get them to be interested in wanting to care for nature and to protect nature. So I think, from at least from these perspectives, I think art is a very powerful tool to get people to think about nature in diverse ways lah. So I mean, I work with Darel, I work with a bunch of other artists in the region to create images, visual images that can elicit emotions in people or to convey particular facts.
So is it
But then
directly,
I think
or
indirectly, more
it,
indirectly,
it,
yeah.
it
But
was not as grand as in the in the history, I would say.
yeah, but you'll be surprised how art or design can sometimes provide surprising insights for nature. I just wanted to revisit some really interesting examples of a scientific paper that I read a few years ago. This scientific paper was a paper that talks about overfishing and the decline of marine organisms. And I thought the researchers who came out with this idea was quite surprising. You know how they got this sense of fish populations suffering from declines. What they did was that they went through a bunch of old-fashioned menus. They looked at menus, and they looked at the portrayal of fish on the menu and the kinds of fish that were available on the menu. And they recreated. Came out with mathematical models to basically uh, explore the relationship between what we know of fish then available in restaurant menus and the present day. And they could show that fish species were declining, were changing, the portrayal of fish was changing, you know. So the amazing thing is that many people who look at art or do art also think about science, and we are often surprised at how we get information about the natural world through art, which on the one hand is meant to be aesthetic, but on the other hand informs research in ways that we didn't think was possible. Yeah. Another more abstract way was that some of these paintings from many years ago, they tell us about the environment of those days, and I know some researchers have gleaned information about paintings, you know, and earth events, geologic events. There's some artworks that people know, in fact famous pieces of work whereby people have been using to explore how geologic events have affected people. I don't know if you know of works that were done, paintings that were done in the very late 80s. You know, in the late 80s, some people made a comment about how a lot of paintings had very dramatic weather uh, background, and that prompted people to think a little bit more about how a volcanic eruption in Indonesia has actually driven climatic changes around the world. I don't know if you remember the very famous piece of painting called, showing a man scream. I think it was by a Norwegian artist.
The scream.
Yeah, the scream. Yeah, the scream's background is so red and very drastic, very stark. You know, some people who study climate is trying to use that and painting from that period to understand the impact of you know, large scale volcanic eruption. So surprisingly, art can inform research in the modern day by offering historical perspectives to modern day environmental problems. Yeah.
Okay, so let me just kind of round up. So thank you so much to all of you for joining in our very wonderful discussion. You know, that kind of explored so many, you know, so well, it's almost a bit difficult to summarize because there's so many things that have been brought up. But I just love this kind of conversation that occurs between art and science, and I'd love to hear a bit more of this as well. You know, I wish that kind of moving forward, we don't see kind of such distinct divisions between art and science, artists and scientists, but we're going to see a lot more collaborations and how this can actually really inform both
Sorry,
sides.
Darel. Sorry, Darel.
Yes.
For those who are still here, right? Actually, I think I want to share that there's a very interesting show now on at National Library called Human Nature. Is it Human Nature?
Yes, Human Nature.
Human X Nature. And
Yeah.
a lot of what we discussed today about naturalists, being naturalists first and scientists later, can be seen in all the books of the past. And they are all available online, the PDFs of all these old books. You can see them online. And you can see how naturalists in the past were all very personal and very aesthetic in their description of science, of nature, before they become very objective. So I think the exhibition is kind of a survey of how nature has been documented in various publications and posters and books form in Singapore. So it tells a very interesting story. So I definitely recommend the exhibition for those who are in those talks.
I just went the other day.
Yeah,
it was quite impressive. Yeah.
Quite impressive.
Yeah, thanks so much for bringing up. Yeah, I wanted to kind of mention that also. So it's it's a continuation of the discussion as well, something that we've been talking about. And so again, the mural and the exhibition are both within walking distance. So if you decide to check out one of them, it's just kind of just across the road. So just wanted to thank our speakers, so Robert and Ding Li, for joining us today. For all of you who have joined in with all the many questions, and also for Sam for supporting the mural, for supporting our session over here. So thanks again for joining in, and we wish you a wonderful weekend ahead. Okay, bye. Yes.
Are we staying on to answer more questions, or what's
No, there's no more questions really.
Yeah, I think we've covered everything already. Yeah.
Okay, but we are already 30 minutes over time.
Yes. So thank you so much to all of you who have hung around for this. Thank you.
Thanks.